In our last few videos, we've been discussing the many different effects of the fall of the Roman Empire, specifically throughout Europe and beyond. And today we'll figure out what happened specifically in Central Europe, in France, Italy, and Germany as a result of the fall of the Roman Empire, specifically where Rome itself ruled. Now, as we know, the world is going to look a lot different after Rome falls, and that all started in 476. The Germanic leader Odoacer led a successful coup against the Roman Empire and essentially took over the state within Italy, creating a new kingdom called the Kingdom of Italy. With the last Roman emperor, Romulus Augustus, deposed by Odoacer, it meant that Rome itself would not have the power that it once did, but there were still remnants. Europe itself, however, is going to be divided up amongst a number of different Germanic kingdoms. We already discussed what happened on the island of England as a result and the emergence of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, but now we want to focus more on what happened in mainland Europe. Remember too, at this time we also have the growth of the Arab caliphates in the Middle East, and of course the continuation of the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire. But Central Europe itself is going to be hit hardest by the fall of Rome. It's during this time that we have a fall away from the old worldview of the Roman Empire and a turn now to these Germanic kingdoms, which, again, in the eyes of the Romans, were a little bit backward and barbarian, namely because they did not carry themselves the same way. They focused more on war and brutal aspects of life. They weren't educated like the Romans once were. This is where that title of the Dark Ages comes in, about the period from 476 all the way up to about 800. And yet the only thing that held back to the Roman Empire was the church. As we discussed in a previous video, the church had so much power over the people of the Middle Ages because it represented structure and organization as well as the only way to be saved. And the church in the West becomes known as the Catholic Church. Catholic means universal. It was the church and it was for all people. And the church itself held out for hope that maybe the Roman Empire could rise again with the church at its head. And many popes will try to find a way to bring back the power and glory of the Roman Empire. Yet, in the midst of all this barbarian conquest and all of the changes in these Germanic kingdoms, that seems pretty impossible. Take, for example, what Pope Gregory said in about 600 AD. "Where is the Senate? Where are the people? The bones are all dissolved, the flesh is consumed, the whole mass is boiled away." Gregory and many others lamented the fall of Rome. Without the Senate, without a true emperor in place, there just wasn't enough unification and enough order to truly bring back Rome and to bring order to the people. And on top of that, the church could never have the same role if it didn't have a relationship with a ruler like it did in the Roman Empire. So that's why throughout the Dark Ages, the church is going to try to find regional kings of these new Germanic tribes, convert them to Christianity so that they have powerful military allies in order to back up the goals of the church, just as it once had at the twilight of the Roman Empire. And initially, many of these barbaric kings, these Germanic kings, did not accept Christianity because it was the way of the Romans. But eventually, one group will accept Christianity and become the carriers of the legacy of the church and Rome. They are the chosen ones. They are the Franks. Between 400 and 700, the Franks emerged as the most powerful of the Germanic kingdoms that had conquered the remnants of the Roman Empire. And they specifically conquered what was the Roman province of Gaul, or modern-day France. And unlike many other Germanic tribes, the Franks took to the old Roman legacy and traditions and viewed themselves in many ways as Roman. And that would be true with their first great king, Clovis. In 486, it was Clovis who led the conquest of Gaul, and shortly after he converted to Christianity. Because of his conversion, Clovis had now gained a powerful ally in the Roman Catholic Church, and at the same time, the church had now gained a political leader that they could use to their advantage. The ensuing Merovingian dynasty would become one of the more powerful kingdoms in Europe at this time, and yet it still had no chance of rivaling what Rome once was. It wasn't as big as the Catholic Church had hoped it could become. Yet Clovis's conversion shows a precedent that if you convert to Christianity and you support the church will then support you. And if the church is supporting you, in theory, God supports you. So in that way, the Frankish Merovingian dynasty becomes the chosen dynasty. This is the one that is meant to carry on the legacy of Rome. And that became all the more clear when the Franks were able to defeat a new enemy and preserve the Christian church from what could have been utter destruction. Remember, during the 600s, it is Muhammad who creates the religion of Islam. And with that, the ensuing Arab caliphates become extremely violent and begin to expand. And it's under the Umayyad dynasty that throughout the 600s and early 700s, they expanded through North Africa and into southern Spain. And it's at that point that these Muslim invaders are on the doorstep of the Roman Empire, what was the Roman Empire, and specifically the doorstep of the Franks. And the ensuing clash between two very different worldviews, between the Christian Franks and the Muslim Caliphate, will be world-changing. The armies of the Umayyads and the Franks clashed at Tours in 732. Under the leadership of Charles Martel, also known as Charles the Hammer, what a baller nickname, by the way, the Franks defeated the Umayyads, stopping their advance and forcing them to stay in Spain. This battle is certainly a significant event in world history. Many historians consider it a turning point because think of what could have happened if the Umayyads won that battle. You could argue that Europe would have been conquered by Islam, and who knows what could have happened to the church. But despite all of this, the fact that the Christians and the Franks win means the church is preserved from arguably its greatest enemy, and we'll unpack that story more in the future. Yet in the meantime, Tours shows that for the Franks, they truly believed that they were chosen by God, and that God's favor was on their side, and that's why they won this victory. And so we're only going to see the relationship between the Franks and the church continue to intensify because of events like Tours. Despite the success of both Clovis and Charles Martel, the church and the Franks never became the true Roman Empire like they wanted to. They needed somebody greater. They needed somebody who could unite Europe together. They needed somebody who could champion the values of both the church and old Rome. That person was a later king of the Franks named Charlemagne. Now, Charlemagne was a normal Frankish king. He was quite powerful, just like Clovis and Charles Martel, but there wasn't necessarily anything else that was special about him, except for what he did. In 800, Rome was facing invasions once again from different Germanic groups, as well as some rebellions against the church. In order to quell the rebellions, to squash the advances towards Rome, Pope Leo called on Charlemagne to bring his Frankish army in and basically rescue the church. And that's exactly what he did. And as a result, the Pope invites Charlemagne over for Christmas dinner in 800 and gives him quite a gift. Pope Leo gives Charlemagne a crown and crowns him Emperor of the Romans. It's here that we see Charlemagne taking on the legacy of both the church and the Roman Empire. It is believed that this is the restart that Rome has always been wanting, and Charlemagne is the chosen one. From 800 to 814, Charlemagne will rule as Emperor of the Romans. It was the intent that he is the new Roman Emperor. Now, of course, there's some debate over this because over in the East, in Constantinople, they would say, well, that emperor is the true Roman emperor. And this is only going to cause divisions between the West and the East, between the church and the governments to only increase. Yet in the meantime, this crowning of Charlemagne is such a significant event in European history. It sets a precedent. Because where does Charlemagne get this new power from? Well, he got it from the Pope. Remember, the Pope, who is considered to be the most powerful man in all of Europe and a representative of God, now his power only increases. And Charlemagne's actions of rescuing the Pope and rescuing the church shows that he is at the service of the church. So it elevates the power of the church even higher than it was before. And yet Charlemagne has more power than anyone in Europe had besides the Roman emperors of old. And Charlemagne will certainly rule in a way that echoes back to the Romans. Even when he was just a ruler of the Franks, before he was this Holy Roman Emperor, more on that title later, Charlemagne rules for 46 years, and in the process rules truly like a Roman would. And all right, I know you've been waiting for it. This is where the Star Wars reference truly comes in. Yes, I compare Charlemagne to Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one. I have brought peace, freedom, justice, and security to my new empire. Your new empire? Don't make me kill you. Charlemagne, my allegiance is to Rome, to the Republic, to democracy. You're not with me, then you're my enemy. Only a German deals in absolutes. I will do what I must. We will try. Why? Okay, maybe Charlemagne and the Pope never had a showdown like Anakin and Obi-Wan had in Star Wars, but it would be so much cooler if they did. Regardless, Charlemagne was truly the church's chosen one. It was him who was believed to save the Roman Empire, to bring it back together. And unlike Anakin, he really kind of does. In the 14-year period that Charlemagne rules as Emperor of the Romans, his new dynasty, the Carolingian dynasty, will expand throughout all of Central Europe, conquering most of what is now modern-day France, Germany, and parts of Italy. Charlemagne's rule ensured that Christianity spread throughout all of Europe. And again, Charlemagne rules in conjunction with the Pope and the Church. This connection to the Church is why Charlemagne is considered to be the world's first Holy Roman Emperor. The Holy Roman Empire will exist and be a continuation of the Roman Empire in their minds, with a greater connection to the Church than ever before. So in addition to ruling with the Church and promoting Christianity, Charlemagne also promoted old Roman ideas. This included a system of governors throughout the Carolingian Empire who would be checked on by officials that reported back to Charlemagne. Charlemagne also desired that his capital city in France, called Aachen, would be second to Rome. And because Charlemagne himself could never read and write, he promoted education throughout the empire, specifically forming curriculum, formal course studies based in Latin education. This included things like grammar, rhetoric, logic, simple math, music, and even astronomy. And through it all, scribes are copying the Bible and other old Latin works so that they can be reproduced and hopefully more accessible to the populace. Despite Charlemagne's death in 814, it's clear that Europe is starting to pick up the pieces of what was a very broken continent after the fall of Rome. But most importantly is this relationship with the Church. It can't be underestimated how much power the Church now has. And we also have to note that Charlemagne himself was of Germanic descent. He's just been crowned Emperor of the Romans, this Latin culture. So now we see a preservation of Roman culture through Germanic culture, what will also become French culture. Yet both France and Germany have their origins in Charlemagne's empire, and that's one of the reasons why they don't really like each other. More on that in a second. The Church has been preserved by Charlemagne, and in many ways so has the legacy of Rome. Yet it's different, because now Christianity is truly at the heart. But Charlemagne's death also proved that he was truly one of a kind. There really wouldn't be a leader like him after. And after his death in 843, his grandsons begin to argue about who should carry on his legacy. It's because of that they eventually decide to divide up the Carolingian Empire at the Treaty of Verdun in 843. First grandson, Charles the Bald, received everything on the map that is orange, which became the state of France. Lothair received everything in green, which I like to call not France. And then, of course, Louis the German received everything in pink, which you would know better as Germany, or as I like to call it, definitely not France. The legacy of the Treaty of Verdun is that it led to the formation of the Kingdom of France, one of the most powerful of the High Middle Ages, as well as the emergence of the Holy Roman Empire, which believed it was a continuation of Charlemagne's original empire. But in the long run, this is often more synonymous with what we consider to be Germany, although it won't be called Germany until about the 1900s. Regardless, Europe has significantly changed because of the relationship between Charlemagne and the Church. It's an attempt to return to the glory of old Rome, but it never really is the same as Rome. It's different because of the relationship between the Church and the state. And this relationship with the Church being truly above the state, because it is the Pope who crowned Charlemagne, it is because of this that there's a precedent set where the Church will always be in power. And that contributes to everything we talked about previously when we talked about the power of the medieval church. And this is something that's not going away. So for a brief moment in European history, we did really have a united Europe once again. But as we saw, that fell. And it's here that Europe becomes even more divided into that feudal system that we've broken down before. But other kingdoms are going to continue to emerge. Kingdoms like France, kingdoms like the Holy Roman Empire, and of course the Kingdom of England. So what will happen when these kingdoms begin to interact even more? What will happen when a distant enemy causes these kingdoms to unite once again? And through it all, what will happen as the Church continues to exert its power and authority over these secular rulers? Well, lots is going to happen. And once again, Europe is only going to continue to change. But that's a story for another day. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.